Jacksonville Jaguars at the Tennessee Titans. Mentioned a few times on the show here. A must-win for Jacksonville. If they win, they're in as the AFC South champions, favored by 5.5 over the Tennessee Titans. It looks like Trevor Lawrence should be back from his plethora of injuries.
Plethora, good word.
Thank you.
Well done. Yeah, Lawrence probably going to be back in this game. I think it makes a big difference for them, but Lawrence hadn't been playing well through the injuries. It's one of those interesting situations where you're like, at what point is the line between hampered Trevor Lawrence and healthy CJ Beathard? Like, where is that? Because Lawrence hadn't been playing well trying to get through those injuries. Do we know if Levis is playing? Because that may be the bigger question to me.
I feel like Levis elevates the ceiling
Yes.
for the Titans in this potential. In this
I will
game,
say, I mean, Tennessee have been the team. Their chickens have come home to roost this season. For the second year in a row, they are going to finish at the year, I think, with the 32nd ranked offensive line in the NFL by our numbers, right? So dead ass last for 2 seasons straight. You can't have success if that's what's going to happen. I was on Ramon, Kayla, and what's the other guy's name? Will,
yeah.
I was on their show this morning, and they were saying that Tannehill had made a comment after the game last time that he felt like John Wick, where he'd just been taking an absolute battering from everywhere. And obviously Ramon, who's a former offensive lineman, was like, that's quite a slight to your offensive line. It is, but it's true.
Very true.
It's hard to argue with the accuracy of the statement.
Tannehill's like, I'm not going to be here next year.
Yeah, I mean,
these guys probably won't be here either because they're terrible, so why not?
Right. None of us are going to be here next year. I'm probably not starting this week if Levis is back. What the hell? Who cares? But that's been the story of that team. Like, the offensive line has been awful. Tannehill can't function behind it. Levis barely functions behind it, but has enough, A, suicidal tendencies, and B, just the arm to fire in some passes anyway. The running game, like, both running backs, Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears, have both been amazing. If they had any sort of offensive line in front of them, we would be looking at that and saying that's the best backfield in the NFL. But they don't. Like, those guys are just making it work by themselves. The Titans just don't have enough.
Pass blocking grade of 36 last week for the Tennessee Titans, by the way. Yeah, it's been rough. The entire line, tackles, situation, guards, Peter Skoronski not. I mean, it all feeds off each other as well.
If you have 4 out of 5 guys in the offensive line that are pretty bad, the one rookie that you expect to come in and fix it is probably not going to look great.
And then Jacksonville last week did a pretty good job taking advantage of the Panthers' offensive line. And that's where the Jags pass rush really only shows up. They have those games every now and again where it feels like they've got a great pass rush, or they'll get a bunch of sacks, and it usually comes against bad offensive lines. So they do have an opportunity to just create a whole lot of havoc against whichever Titans quarterback. Will Levis did not practice yesterday with a foot injury.
Tannehill. Don't love it.
I mean, either guy under pressure. But Levis has the highest average depth of target in the NFL. Tannehill's high, too, because that's what the offense is doing. But Levis is just going to chuck it deep and see what happens. Jags finally played better on the back ends. They had been getting torched in recent weeks defensively, no matter who they went up against, whether it was the Bucs on Christmas Eve, it was the Bengals a few weeks ago, Jake Browning's breakout game. The Jacksonville defense played their best game last week in quite a while. So they're going to need more of that in this must-win game against the Titans.
This is so, you talk about narratives and how sometimes they can come from just statistical quirks that aren't necessarily real. Trayvon Walker is currently on a run of 6 sacks in 6 games, and he's now going up against the Titans' offensive line. He's going to finish the season with like 8 sacks in 7 games, and we're going to be hearing all offseason about how he's turned a corner and he's become a superstar. And his PFF grade, his pass rushing grade is 58, which is the same as it was a year ago.
Yeah, it's an interesting narrative around Trayvon Walker. He had a really nice sack last week, lined up over the guard, had a nice quick win. He had another one where he tracked down Bryce Young in a cleanup situation. Our friend Pete Prisco, got to get Pete on the podcast. Talk to old crotchety Pete at the Super Bowl or something. But Pete was trying to explain that he doesn't think Trayvon Walker's doing a great job, winning and creating pressure.
Down well.
And despite the sacks. And I'm like, Pete, just use PFF grades. You've been reluctant all these years. The grades will tell you the story. Interestingly enough, the ESPN pass rush win rate, their win rate has him high, which I'm curious about with Trayvon. But I'll have to talk to my ESPN friends when I see them over at Sloan next year. Either way, there is a narrative around Trayvon Walker that he's like an elite run defender and he's getting all this pressure. And I don't think, from what we've seen,
I don't think any
is true.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I don't think any positive aspect of the narrative on Trayvon Walker is true, other than his freaky athleticism, which does show up. Like, I forget, I was watching his tape recently. Might have been against the Bengals. I forget where it was, but there was one play in it where like he just jumps inside, absolutely whoops the offensive tackle. Like that's amazing. Like, there are not many tackles in the NFL that are going to be able to live with that sort of Euro step inside move that he had.
He's got some high-end plays like
that.
Yeah,
but you're like, that's why they drafted him number one, because there's like only a handful of guys on the planet that can do that, even at this level. Like, it's him, it's Myles Garrett, it's Micah Parsons. That's like, that might be it. That might be the end of the list. But the difference is those guys do that 5 times a game, and you do it once every other game.
We have him with 10 sacks, so Trayvon Walker, 10 sack guy.
Twice the number of last year with the same pass rushing grade.
He's going to have 20 next year.
Yeah, well, I mean,
last year he had more penalties than sacks.
That's the trajectory he's on. Double it every year.
I will say, I mean, I'm trying to be objective about this stuff. It's no bias either way. This was the point in Rashawn Gary's career where he turned things around. Rashawn Gary,
but he also turned it around grading-wise.
But he turned it. I know that. But so I'm saying, like, there's still like a world where the grading can turn around. Like, he can win more as well. And I think he's done well over the guard when nickel situations where you're rushing against guards.
I'm not saying he doesn't do anything well ever, but he plays almost all of the snaps. So he's going to have some positive plays in his take. Like, he's not a guy that simply has no business being in the NFL, but he doesn't make enough positive plays relative. Like, he's played 800 snaps already twice in his career. Last season was 3 shy of 900. This season he's already at 823. There are going to be some positive plays in there, and because he's that freaky athletic, the positive plays tend to look quite spectacular. But when you're playing that much, you need to do it more often. Like, that's the bottom line. And the thing with Rashawn Gary is, sometimes it's going to take 2 years or whatever to become that guy. But when Gary started to get it, it started to show quite early on in his grading, whereas Trayvon Walker is just on a good run of sacks.
No, I get it. I mean, Gary started in like the last quarter of his second season.
Yeah.
And he didn't play every snap. I will say Walker's been durable, played a ton of ball. Either way, we can pick the game. Jaguars favored by 5.5. AFC South on the line here.
Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to beat Tennessee, go to the playoffs, and host Joe Flacco and the Browns.